Muchas gracias a todos por haber venido. Les agradezco el interés. Creo que este es un evento muy importante para nosotros como comunidad de la UNAM y del posgrado. Es una escuela de verano que ya esta es su segunda edición, pero concretamente los temas que en esta vamos a tocar creo que son los primeros en su naturaleza en esta universidad. No sé si en el país, pero quiero pensar que en el país para sentirme bien. Entonces, les agradezco en primera instancia a todos por tener el tiempo y la energía de venir hasta acá a compartir con nosotros. Y bueno, vamos a hacer un pequeño mensaje de bienvenida. En primer lugar, me gustaría, bueno, estamos aquí sentados, nuestro director del posgrado de la Facultad de Economía, el doctor Antonio Ibarra, y bueno, sobre todo nuestra directora, de la que también ha sido responsable de un montón de iniciativas en últimas fechas, ¿no? Que ha promovido la apertura internacional de nuestro posgrado y sobre todo de la facultad, la maestra Lorena Rodríguez León, a quien le agradecemos mucho que esté con nosotros. Tiene otros compromisos, pero se toma el tiempo. Bueno, y si gustan, te doy la palabra, Lorena.
La pasamos a Toño para que nos dé.
Bueno, a ver si funciona este. Me parece
ya.
que funciona. Bueno, les agradezco mucho. La directora es Lorena, ¿no? Yo soy, sí. A mí me toca administrar el posgrado. Digamos que yo soy el de casa. Entonces, como conserje de casa, me da muchísimo gusto recibirles. Sobre todo porque el tema que se han propuesto es un tema que nos interesa para la formación de nuestros estudiantes, porque los tenemos que poner en la agenda contemporánea de América Latina. Ese es parte del esfuerzo. Y yo tendría especial interés en que en algún momento ustedes pudieran también conversar con ellos. Están en exámenes, andan en el ácido, pero por acá van a aparecer. Por otro lado, el hecho de que tengamos una segunda escuela de verano, por otro, significa para nosotros la posibilidad de que estas continuidades sean también una manera de alojarlos, de que ustedes circulen, de que hagan relaciones con nuestros profesores, con los estudiantes. Por tanto, les digo, siéntanse en casa, habiten el edificio, circulen por la biblioteca, conversen con los profesores, los que encuentren, ¿eh? Bueno, acá está el profesor Arturo Huerta, así es que lo pueden pescar ahí. Si está en su bibliografía, esta es la ocasión para discutir con él, cosa que le encanta. Así que podemos aprovechar su visita también para circular ideas, para hacer proyectos futuros. Cosa que agradezco mucho a la iniciativa de Julia Juárez, que ha sido la impulsora de estas escuelas de verano, que en esta ocasión, tenemos mucho gusto en recibir a Ángela Rojas, que va a ser nuestra keynote del día de hoy. Ángela, como ustedes ya verán, es una académica muy seria, es una académica con ideas, productora de conocimiento de América Latina, así es que es una magnífica entrada. Bueno, yo simplemente les digo, sean ustedes bienvenidos, apropiense del espacio, del tiempo que van a estar acá y espero que la pasen bien. Muchísimas gracias.
Muy bien, muy buenos días a todas y a todos. Nos da mucho gusto recibirles en estas instalaciones del posgrado de Economía, de la Facultad de Economía de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, para iniciar los trabajos de la Segunda Escuela de Verano de Economía Aplicada para América Latina. Este es un esfuerzo, como ya se mencionaba, además de promovido por Julia, a quien le agradezco mucho siempre el entusiasmo para poder llevar a cabo una serie de iniciativas académicas muy importantes que, como ya decía ella hace un momento, tienen no solo el objetivo de crear espacios de discusión al interior de nuestra propia comunidad del posgrado de la Facultad de Economía, sino también abrirnos hacia lo que ocurre en la región. Es muy importante considerar que en el momento actual, la región de América Latina, que está enfrentando múltiples desafíos económicos que van pues desde la baja inversión, el alto endeudamiento, la fragilidad de muchas de las economías y sobre todo un tema de desigualdad en la región, y frente a los retos que estamos enfrentando actualmente, pues definitivamente el contar con un espacio y un foro donde jóvenes estudiantes puedan discutir acerca de esos grandes retos que como región enfrentamos, pues es fundamental. No solo para entender lo que está ocurriendo, sino también para pensar pues en cuáles pueden ser las alternativas hacia el futuro. Y me parece que en ese sentido la función de las universidades es central. Y por supuesto que la función de las universidades públicas es fundamental para pensar en esos desafíos y cómo los enfrentamos. Ahora, creo que en estos espacios de las escuelas de verano, pues siempre se puede no solo compartir con colegas de otros lados. Me estaba comentando Julia que tenemos participantes de Canadá, de Dinamarca, de Colombia, de Brasil, de la India, de los Estados Unidos, ¿de dónde más? Ya dije Brasil. Argentina. De Argentina, por supuesto, nuestras y nuestros estudiantes de México. Entonces es un foro en donde seguramente ese intercambio de experiencias internacionales nos va a permitir tener también un acercamiento mucho más profundo hacia las problemáticas, la forma en cómo las están estudiando ustedes mismos en sus diferentes espacios, y eso para la universidad y para la Facultad de Economía es muy importante y les agradecemos que estén aquí. Seguramente los trabajos de esta segunda escuela de verano van a ser muy ricos en ese sentido y vamos a estar discutiéndolos todavía durante largo tiempo. Creo también que estar en la escuela más antigua de economía de nuestro país, que tiene una tradición muy larga de pensamiento crítico, de pensamiento plural, pues debe ser un entorno muy estimulante para estas discusiones que se van a tener, y espero que así lo reciban, porque para nosotros es muy importante tenerles en esta segunda escuela de verano. Y seguramente pues será una tradición que esperamos continúe durante los próximos años, y en definitiva pues quien la hace posible son quienes participan. Así que muchas gracias a todas y a todos, de manera particular muchas gracias Julia, porque detrás también de todos estos esfuerzos pues hay un trabajo enorme, no solo de coordinación, sino también de ponerle toda la imaginación y todo el rigor académico que requiere para que estas escuelas de verano sean puntos de referencia, no solo para las y los economistas que se están formando en nuestro país, sino prácticamente en toda la región de América Latina. Y pues sean muy bienvenidas y muy bienvenidos a la Facultad de Economía, a este espacio que es realmente muy significativo, que es el auditorio del posgrado de la Facultad de Economía, y pues les deseo que sean unos trabajos de la Escuela de Verano muy fructíferos, seguramente que así serán. Y bueno, pues muchas gracias y muy buenos días. A continuación vamos a iniciar con una conferencia magistral. Le agradecemos muchísimo a Ángela Rojas que esté con nosotros, y bueno, a los demás conferencistas que van a estar dando sus participaciones a lo largo de los próximos días. Tenemos la participación, por supuesto, de nuestro querido profesor y colega, el doctor Juan Carlos Moreno Brit, y también estará Lorenzo Nalín en las conferencias magistrales, y bueno, en todas las demás actividades en las que estaremos participando, y también saludar con mucho gusto a quienes están conectados, ¿no? Y conectadas, que también esa participación también es muy importante. Por supuesto que nos gusta recibirles de manera presencial en las instalaciones de la facultad, pero afortunadamente pues estos diálogos también se pueden ver enriquecidos a través de estas participaciones híbridas, y lo fundamental es precisamente poder tener esos espacios de diálogo, de discusión en la modalidad que ahora nos permite también la tecnología. Pero bueno, muchas gracias, bienvenidas, bienvenidos, y que sea una segunda versión de esta Escuela de Verano de Economía Aplicada para América Latina muy exitosa. Gracias y buenos días.
Muchísimas gracias a la directora, la segunda directora que tiene la tercera directora que ha tenido la facultad. Pero yo creo que por mucho la más activa, ¿no? Estamos muy orgullosos de eso. También quisiera reconocer el trabajo del Young Scholar Initiative del Institute for New Economic Thinking por traernos aquí. Mi amigo y colega Manuel Valencia, que no está aquí ahora, pero está conectado, también a Juliano Toshiro como representante de esta institución, el Institute. Y bueno, yo sé que aquí presentes conocen muy bien el Young Scholar, por eso están aquí. Les agradezco mucho, muchísimas gracias, directora. Esperemos que tenerla en muchas otras ediciones de esta escuela de verano. Muchas gracias. Bueno, ahora sí, damos inicio a la presentación de la doctora. Muchas gracias. Gracias.
Hello, yeah. Okay, good. Okay, let's switch. That's part of the deal to make this main conference in English and include the other non-Spanish speakers. I'm really glad to be here with you in this summer school, in this prestigious university for the region. And I thank all the team, Julia, of course, and Dr. Antonio Ibarra for this invitation to share with you some of the research I've developed at the Universidad de Antioquia in Colombia with my research group, the group in regional studies, and in the field of institutional analysis. I've been working on this in the last decade and working out regional development. So for today, this is our outline. I'll give you an introduction and then go into 2 case studies. These case studies take place in Colombia, but I want you to think of them as cases that may be happening in other places of Latin America. And we'll have some commonalities, and that's the point of case studies, to give us a rich detail, to give us much more basis for theory building, right? So that's the perspective I want you to have here with these cases, and we'll find, I'm ending with some final reflection. To start, I want to tell you that the last year we were commemorating the publishing of this novel. It's a fiction novel, La Voragine, or The Vortex. It's a jungle novel genre about a couple that runs away from the capital and ends up in the jungle. The novel tells the situation of rubber tree exploitations, and at that time, in the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, there was this rubber booming market. Rubber was in high demand because of manufacturing goods such as cars and machinery in general. So rubber was used for manufacturing tires, belts, and other military and commercial products. And rubber was exploited from the Amazon trees, the rubber tree, using forced labor. Indigenous people were forced, as well as poor peasants. And the novel makes this denounce this, it's a sort of an indictment of wild capitalism. And while we were researching on these cases with our team, we sometimes wondered how much things have changed since these situations portrayed in the novel. And that was one question I want you to keep in mind while I'll develop the cases. I'll go back to this point at the end. So how far has we come in terms of this unchecked capitalism? Okay, so one of our main concepts and goal here is sustainable development. For short, we can say it's about how we must live today if we want a better tomorrow. And this goal, we need to balance three main pillars according to the official definition of what sustainable development is. And these three pillars are the economic one. We're talking about prosperity, about economic growth. The social one, so we want social inclusion, we want opportunities for people, education, health, and the environmental pillar. So we want conservation, ecological balance, and all these three, balancing these three dimensions, of course, it's not an easy task, and it's easier said than done, right? So we are in that quest in our research from different perspectives. From the perspective of institutional analysis, we highlight this point because we need people to commit and people to take action towards reaching this sustainable development. Of course, we need collective action. How do we achieve this collective action? And the institutions that allow us to intervene or change practices we dislike or we want to improve social outcomes. And this study of institutions is supported, well, in my case, in my research, by the institutional analysis and development framework developed by Elinor Ostrom. Some of you may have heard of this framework, developed to study collective action on common pool resources management. However, the framework is more general. It's not only for common pool resources. It is related to collective actions and the provision of public goods as well. So it's been a useful framework for me in my research, and this framework aims to understand how institutional phenomena work and support social organization. It integrates insights from several social sciences and promote their dialogue. And this is an important point here. We're not talking about institutional economics or institutional politics. We are integrating insights from different social sciences. And also we are combining methods here to understand these institutional phenomena, and we're using different methods, combining it, and also inviting scholars to do this collaborative research with the framework. This figure here shows the framework. It's inspired in game theory. At the center, we have action situations, which are interactions between main actors that produces outcomes. And of course, these interactions have a context given by biophysical conditions, attributes of community and other actors as well, and all the institutional component, the formal one, rules in use. But of course, we also have social norms in the attributes of communities. And our point is to understand how actors organized when they don't obtain the outcomes they want, or they are dissatisfied with the current outcomes, and how this feedbacks into building of new rules or changing attributes of the community. In terms of methods, we have two big groups: field methods and models and experiments. The field methods are methods we used when we don't have much data, when we want to study non-elite actors, that we don't have information about non-elite actors, subnational actors, of course, as well on informal institutions. So it's like a first stage to understand much better a problem, and also to provide information and insights to the other methods, models, and experiments, which are more abstract or deductive in nature. So the dialogue and the mixing and combining methods, of course, in research teams is very much fruitful, according to these scholars, Ostrom's work and her colleagues. And we're working, following this track. So the case study method focuses intensively on cases, individual cases. Let's see what happened. It doesn't go on, okay. It does go on, okay. Help. Okay, wait, since it has battery, okay. I'm not sure what happened. Yeah? Okay, good, yeah. So our first case used this case study method. It helps in complex phenomena to understand it, and this is going to be complex, as you will see. It's about wind power complex in La Guajira, Colombia. Here's the map. So we locate La Guajira. It's the tip of Colombia, the northwest point. You see it has a long coast in the Caribbean Sea. It neighbors Venezuela. And it happens to be the region with the powerful winds and also solar energy. And this is the back, the two pictures. One shows the wind farm currently working in Cabo de la Vela, which is one municipality in High Guajira. We have High, Middle, and Low Guajira. And the other picture is a fishing community discussing environmental impacts of these wind farms. So a statement of the problem. What happened here? La Guajira, it's a territory populated by the largest indigenous group in Colombia, 20%. These people are ancestral settlers. They came to the area 3,000 years ago. So they know the territory really, and adapted to really demanding geographical conditions. So the Spaniards didn't came to this place. It was a hostile place for them. And that's why these indigenous people were able to preserve their culture, preserve their society. And the same we could say for the Republican government. They didn't reach the territory as well. That's why we said it's this area, it's historically neglected by the state. And in the last decades, multinational energy companies came to build wind farms. They must strike agreements with the communities, as most of the projects are located in the indigenous reservation area. And this is a key aspect here for the community. They have this right over the territory. Conflicts between communities and companies emerged. One company decided to leave. while others face significant delays to start producing energy. Currently, we don't know what's going to happen with these projects, for sure. So there's a current discussion. Some investments have been made. We have some equipment on land, but the equipment is not installed yet because of these conflicts. Let's apply the framework. First, to understand the interaction here, we have a social dilemma. Two parties would both gain if cooperate to make agreements to produce renewable energy. And the question is what kind of interaction we have here. Is it an assurance game or a prisoner's dilemma game? So remember, if it's an assurance game, it's a matter of coordination, a matter of finding a focal point, but there's commonality of interests. Whereas in prisoner's dilemma game, we have some commonality, but also conflicting interest. So when we dig into the case, we find, of course, actors are asymmetric and have opposing interests regarding social and environmental issues. And this is reflected in the type of compensations agreements they could strike. Each actor here fears the other takes advantage. The companies are not willing to compensate that much or acknowledge environmental impacts, and whereas communities explain that the impacts are much larger than companies recognized. So we say it's a prisoner's dilemma game. So it's like conflicting interest marked the social interactions here. We could say we have a sequence of interaction. What I'm going to show you takes place in the last decade. So it's a sequence of interactions between government actors, energy companies, and communities to produce a private good, green energy, with positive environmental externalities in terms of climate change, but potentially negative ones. There are other negative environmental externalities and, of course, socioeconomic ones as well. That affects mainly the community, community. So let's see the context. First, I'm sorry, I didn't advance the progress here. Yeah, no, but it's okay, now it's moving. Yes, so context. First, the geographical context. People think this is a desert, but it's not a desert. It's a dry tropical rainforest. It has high temperatures all year, no fresh water, and high biodiversity of marine animals and birds. The area also happens to be rich in coal, sea salt, and gas. So there's, in fact, an open-mined pit of coal, one of the largest in Latin America. This mine is not on the indigenous reserve territory. And now companies are interested in exploiting this wind and solar energy. Attributes of these communities, I think they were this date of 400,000 inhabitants in the Colombian side. It's of 2018, more or less the same size of inhabitants in the Venezuelan side. So this is a binational community. They are nomadic and seasonal settlers and make a living based on fishing, tourism, and goats. They have relative social isolation. They are not integrated with the rest of Colombian society. Distrust of non-Guayús, deep distrust. Most of them don't speak Spanish adequately, and high incidence of poverty and poor health standards. These people are organized in 30 primary clans, and they live in the small communities scattered over the territory. Also, we found inter-clan conflicts and clashes between communities' authorities. Here in this table, I introduced the other actors. This is a summary. I'm not going into details, but just to give you a sense of the other actors. Companies, there's one company currently operated, a Colombian company called Isagen, and there are other 15 projects in phase 1 and 2, funded by 17 multinational companies. These companies have 57 projects officially registered in the Ministry of Mining, projected to start working in 2030. This is information obtained in 2023. There's one NGO which has been very important for Guayús in the past. This is the NGO that has helped these communities to organize and to build up an autonomous protocol related to this prior consultation right. And other two NGOs, international ones, though the main actors, the NGO actors in the past. In terms of state actors, there are 6-7 ministries involved at national level and authorities at the regional level as well. This is the map of all these projects, offshore and onshore. The green area indicates the indigenous reservation. And you'll see most of the projects are in the indigenous reservation area. And you see also the lines to transmit energy, these lines of for collecting energy and transmitting it to other areas of the country. I think I showed the map, right. And next, our main focus as well is on rules in use. The social regulations we find here, formal and informal, a whole set of legislation for energy transition, all the national development plans of the last two governments, the two key rights for these indigenous communities, the Indigenous Reserve enacted on 1984 and 1994, and the constitutional right of these communities to prior consultation, free and informed consent with ethnic communities. On the Guayú side, we have uses and customs, a whole set of social regulations. Recently, well, in 2022, the autonomous protocol I mentioned, and two types of authorities: ancestral authorities given by clans, decided by matrilineal lineage, and traditional authorities, which are recently created to manage government transfers and manage all rights related to salt mines in the area. Other types of informal regulations are the companies' lobbies with governments. So to track the process of interaction, this is the summary. I'm going to highlight the main points here, but if you're interested in this, we could talk about it during the week, this week of summer school. So in the relationship between these main two actors, companies, we see fiercely competed against each other to obtain projects' official approval. Some made informal agreements to shortcut prior consultations and decided discretional compensation. So this was really a decentralized process. One company participated in renewable energy auctions that set production sale deadlines, and that really hurries companies to start producing energy. And that was precisely the company that exited the area in 2023, that quit the project. And it happened, well, we have here construction incidents between some of these outsourced companies that built infrastructure for the wind farms and created conflicts because they ignored vital areas for the Wayuu. So these people didn't know the territory, and Wayuu people, they do really know it. So there were communication problems to intervene, to build up these wind farms. Yeah. Government. Really, we have here things that it shouldn't happen, but we had this situation. The government, the previous, not the current, but the previous government reduced royalties that has to be transferred to the communities. So they reduced the percentage of this raw energy production from 6 to 1%. So less royalties for Wayuu communities. The government didn't provide a solid legal framework for all these impacts, and that was a source of dispute as well. Regional authorities helped some companies to strike deals with non-ancestral authorities. So as I told you before, these two types of authorities, ancestral and traditional, but the ancestral has more legitimacy than the traditional ones. So the traditional ones are for more pragmatic management of government resources, but the community accept with more respect ancestral authorities. And with the change in the government from 2022, we see a more comprehensive approach, more sympathetic towards communities. However, this government somehow has its hands tied because of previous contracts, all the contracts signed in the previous government. Communities. Of course, we see these conflicts, as I mentioned, even some wind wars, violent conflicts between these two types of authorities in some communities, in some clans. The community learned how to protest, so they have these road and construction sites blockages. And finally, they have internal disputes for land property rights and differential compensation. And that was more serious because of some Venezuelan Wayúus came to the territory. And as I mentioned, they have these seasonal and nomadic practices. Once you want to set the limits or the border of a community, it's quite difficult if people are moving around. So outcomes, main outcomes here, communities, after all these interactions, experience division, resentment, and distrust. There's uncertainty in companies' prospects, especially offshore projects. These projects are more controversial in terms of environmental impacts related to birds, corridors for birds and movement. Finally, companies openly say, you government have to help us with communities. And finally, communities said, okay, we are not happy with the compensations agreements we had in the past. We want to start afresh and make new prior consultations with the autonomous protocol we developed. However, the government couldn't really allow for allow for these changes. The communities said, okay, we're not allowing companies to enter our territory, and right now all this investment is uncertain, as I said before. So we don't see these other 15 projects. We don't see much movement of construction. So everything is paralyzed right now. So what do we learn about collective action and how to move from a prisoner's dilemma when we have divergent interest between main actors to a less conflicting interaction, to share commonality of interest, and actors to go in the same direction. How do we achieve that? First, in terms of what use collective action, it's important to understand these people have not organized before. They, as a community, they worked in a very decentralized way. These people don't have the language, don't have the technical capacities to understand and negotiate these prior consultations. So we need guidance and support for creating understanding and capacities. However, this takes time. Communities experience resistance. And I told you, it's we have isolation, relative social isolation. And relatively quickly, we have, well, in a quick way, we have these companies with this interest of exploiting these renewable sources of energy, and companies are very well organized and are very effective in their lobbies, but this is a big contrast with community, with this community in particular. The other point is overcoming this distrust may take at least one generation time. The market, the speed in which market works, it's really very different to the speed of social change, what social change could take here in these communities. So we have this clash of rhythm, different social rhythm. This is what I want to express. In terms of the business actors, one, because they have worked in a decentralized way, and each company obtained different deals, one point is organize the industry and adopt better standards and monitoring, especially this industry in terms of renewables, wind energy, but related to these ethnic communities. It's not the same to make up this type of projects in non-ethnic communities or in areas with easy access or different or more different geographical conditions, you know, more not that extreme as those in La Guajira. Of course, we have here 3 or 4 government failures, and it's something to work out. We've seen regulatory capture in all this legislation, especially the previous during the previous government. We see the redistributive failures. However, we have a constitution that tells we are a social and democratic state. But in practice, we know we're far from that idealistic concept, but we aim to have, at least in our narrative, to have a social and democratic society. So this is something to keep working out. Distrust of the state authorities hinders the intermediating role it should play as a neutral third party in shaping market. And this takes time as well, and it's something we should take into account. If the previous governments sell out people's rights, we cannot pretend that that didn't happen, and out of the blue, people will start trusting the state actors, right? So this is something to build up. And one point to start is to fill in regulatory voids in prior consultation processes and in impact studies. All these voids are exploited by companies to obtain more favorable conditions in their contracts. Good, so this is a picture of flamingos. There's a wildlife sanctuary And this is one of the birds that what you said is going to be more affected by these turbines and these towers. So let's fly farther south the territory to go into the second case. And this case, the second case, used the comparative field-based research. Here we have two cases we compared based on some common characteristics, and we want to understand the explanatory factors, understand variation as well. These two cases are located in northeast Antioquia and northeast Chocó, and are on artisan and small-scale mining. Again, extractivism here. This is the map. So we are, In this map, we have these dark brown points. These are the areas where alluvial gold mines are located and identified by satellite imaging. And these are the intensive, there's intensive exploitation of alluvial gold there. Here's a picture of, the landscape of this alluvial gold exploitation. You see here the a processing site, processing facilities. They use quite rudimentary machinery, but there's some capital investment. So it's a small scale mining, artisanal mining. It's relatively labor intensive, and there's division of labor to process all these amounts of land and rocks. Statement of the problem, what's going on here? Booming gold mining since 2000, so 25 years of high prices. 70% of this gold comes from these two areas. That's why we chose these areas. We made a study for the Extractive Industry and Transparency Initiative in 2018 in these two areas. The artisanal and small-scale mining producers work alongside mining companies stimulated by high prices. And again, we have here a regulatory problem. Regulation is not inclusive. Regulation is sort of biased. I'll explain it. And negative environmental externalities. By the way, there's no people from Peru, but Peru has areas with very similar characteristics. It's the second gold exporter in Latin America with Colombia. And we're adding complexity here. If you thought the previous case is complex, no, this is even more complex. Because here we have a third actor, criminal actors or non-state armed actors. They come stimulated by high prices and weak state control in these territories. Let's apply the framework. Again, I'm giving you a summary, a sense of what's going on here. There's so many details and information, quantitative and some qualitative information. We have some statistics. So if you're interested, we could talk about it. But I'll give you the main points. Okay, kind of interaction between, if we focus on producers, we have here a market competition game between a small and large scale miners. Once again, that's in the previous case, but here this is a market competition game, asymmetries play an important role. Asymmetries in terms of the technology they use to exploit gold, capital, and power to influence regulation. What we have here, an uneven playing field. Mining regulation favored companies and small miners, were seen as illegal producers. And that was outraging for small-scale producers to say they are illegal when they were for centuries mining the territory. I'll explain it. So for this period of time. So we have a sequence of interactions between small miners, mining companies, and governmental actors, plus criminal actors to produce a private good, gold, with negative externalities again here. Environmental externalities related to mercury contamination. The worst externality, there are other related to water. And deforestation, which is not good at all for climate change. And negative socioeconomic externalities, labor exploitation among them, ugly health effects, and criminality. Let's see the context, the geographical context. We have Bajo Cauca is the region, the northeast region, and other neighboring municipalities, as in the map I showed before. This region in Antioquia, it's an Andean valley with irrigated lands. There's the Cauca River, the second river in Colombia. The area, you could access easily the area and find other economic activities. It's, the population, it's middle-sized. So they are connected to other parts of the region. They are in transport corridors. Whereas biographical Chocó, biographic Chocó, this light green strip you see in the second map, it's an isolated territory by the Andean mountain range. It's difficult to access from on land, by land. And the way to move around the area is to use rivers, by river navigation, or by the Pacific coast. And you have a rainforest here as well. It rains the whole year heavily. And of course, relative isolation in this territory as well. About community. In Antioquia, we have mestizo, mainly mestizo communities, peasants here, with some indigenous minorities. These people have been mining since colonial times. So their fathers and grandfathers and previous parents make a living out of mining. And there's other economic activities, well, agriculture and cattle raising. However, these people live in poverty. They are below the country's average. There are about 40,000 subsistence miners. That was the statistic we obtained in 2016, which was difficult because there's no updated mining census. And all these territories were badly hit by armed conflict. Chocó, Afro-descendant communities, and some indigenous minorities. Few mestizo communities are really small, so the predominant population is Afro-descendant. It's the poorest region with the lowest health standard in Colombia. About the same amount of subsistence miners as in the previous regions, and they didn't experience directly the armed conflict, but neighboring municipalities did. In this table, we'll see other actors. Just one figure to give you a context of production. 57.4% of gold production came from Antioquia, whereas in Chocó, 14%, about 14% of this gold production came from Chocó in this period of time, 2017, 2021. Business actors, here's some an important difference. In Antioquia, we have two main companies, The first one is Colombian capital that has a long-standing presence in this region. And recently, since 2010, this Canadian company came to exploit the area. In Chocó, we didn't find these big businesses. There were a handful medium-sized companies, most of them registered as Colombian companies, but we know there were some capitals coming from other countries, so people that have money in the US and invested it in these middle-sized companies. Some NGOs were helping out these communities, the United Nations Development Program, USAID, and this extractive industry and transparency initiative, the Colombian chapter. And we don't know what's going on now if USAID is no longer in the area, because it played an important role in many programs to reduce or eliminate the use of mercury, for example, or give technical training to small-scale miners. State actors, as in the same case, it's the same government, a whole constellation of ministries, too many ministries involved, so you may imagine there's coordination problem here, and regional authorities as well. Non-state armed actors, the main one is the paramilitary groups, known Clan del Golfo right now, and other non-state actors, armed actors. And these people move around the territory, so they move from one region to the other. Regulation. So here, there's so many regulations here. We made institutional analysis of some of these regulations to diagnose some of the problems with the regulation. That was in 2018. There's a mining code enacted in 2001. This code had the advice of some Canadian actors that you imagine, well, Canada has big mining companies, and some of these people came to advise Colombian government at that time. Environmental regulations, more recently, program for mercury elimination, program for mining formalization. Those were the programs we analyzed. Yeah. And since the peace agreement, there are some special development programs for these territories, especially in Antioquia and some most of Chocó's municipalities, and some international standards, as I mentioned before, programs. Rules in use. So I mentioned the set of formal regulations, but what matters here is rules in use. And here we see this conditional application of law, that law is it's not binding or enforced in the same way in both territories. In Antioquia, because we have these big actors, the big companies, somehow they followed some of these regulations, but in Chocó, the case is the opposite. Some programs like Oro Legal, Legal Gold, other programs for addressing environmental externalities, and some mechanisms of the community to push governments for a more inclusive regulation. In Chocó, all this mining is kind of really wild. Some companies were exploiting gold without permits and licenses, so openly exploiting without authorities checking the territory, or bribery of regional authorities. Two programs, we didn't see the international intervention, the same international intervention we observed in Antioquia. Chocó has some programs, but short-term intervention, one-shot intervention, and that's it. Action situation, process tracing. We underscored in these small-scale producers, companies, state actors, interactions, how all this struggle started. Areas of traditional mining were titled to companies, and small-scale miners resented it. State actors used a police operation to destroy illegal processing sites and prosecute miners. And we saw all this response of small-scale miners. They went on a strike and paralyzed the region and forced the governments to consider the condition, recognize, I would say better, to recognize they have the right to mine in the territory. In Chocó, state actors, lack of control, they didn't really intervene in the area. The enforcement of the standards was very, very low. Illegal companies started exploiting the area, and that was the perfect scenario for criminal bands, for gangs, for non-state actors to find a source of income. Main outcomes, to start wrapping up, main outcomes here: gold production is still predominantly illegal. Only 30% of Colombian gold exports is legal. It means it's declared, you could trace the origin, and companies have all permits and comply with environmental standards. So, because informality rules, we have serious environmental damage, deforestation, mercury contamination, and all the situation, the worst happens in Chocó. Social conflict, displacement of communities, mainly indigenous communities, and extortion of the small-scale miners. As a result, recently in 2022, the government adopted a new policy approach, an approach in which these small-scale miners were recognized, and programs for formalization, diversify, and these small-scale miners received some technical assistance and legal advice. The other main result we have is the contrasting collective action of actors in these two regions. In Antioquia, results, the collective action of these communities was stronger, with organizations. They organized in associations, 2 associations they had. They were much more active in getting recognition, formal recognition from governments, and currently they achieve the enactment of a special district to receive investment for agro-mining and fishing as alternatives to mining. And this is part of our discussion for communities that have no options, only coca crops or mining, illegal mining. So the point is, let's give people other economic alternatives or other sources of income. So here the process is quite successful. Chocó lagged behind, and there's no surprise with all the context I've been explaining. Collective action is weak. These communities deeply distrust association. And it's the same, it has some commonality with the Guayús communities. Afro-descendant people haven't organized until recently because they were given collective land rights. But they're not evenly educated. they've been in subsistence levels. So if we want them to organize, we need to prepare them to do so. There's an association, but it's a small one. It only comprises 30% of all these small-scale producers. And they recently started mimicking small-scale miners in Antioquia. So they've been learning to make road blockages to draw authorities' attention and strikes in the area to paralyze economic activity and say, hey, we have a problem, we got to talk about it. Good. Lessons. If we want to move toward a level playing field in this market competition, well, put it in these terms. And about collective action, which is our main interest as well here. In Antioquia, small-scale miners made efforts to take distance from criminal actors, and this is a very important point. Otherwise, they don't have this legitimacy to negotiate with governments because they are always accused of being criminals and denied their ancestral rights to mine. Second, well, they achieve this legal stance and the recognition of the sector. So now we don't speak in terms of illegal miners. They don't like these terms. Now we say they are irregular miners or miners in process of formalization, which is more positive language than just, oh, you're illegal, you're a criminal, right? And these miners show that a purely punitive approach from the state reinforces resistance in the population and favors criminality. So it worsens things. And it seems to me that this is the state of things in Peru. The state is more, they're not at this point in the same point as Antioquia's miners, right? They're still prosecuting small scale miners. Chocó, these miners are less integrated to society. As I told before, it calls for support to help them build up trust, communication, cooperation, and organization. The state is openly dysfunctional in the region, so government failures here are acute. And this is a point to really tackle. I cannot pretend that nothing is happening. We cannot have collective action if you're fearful of violence and of physical violence, of threats. You prefer not to relate to others because you don't know who the other is, if it's in a criminal band or not. So this is this lack of state presence and criminality goes against building up collective action. Reinforce global market standards and monitoring. Mining sector has set out multiple strategies to improve their standards. This is ongoing in the industry for decades. It's one of these industries that made important efforts to adopt better practices, better standards, and they have mechanisms such as origin certification, where the minerals come from and the way in which they were exploited. There's this program of conflict minerals in Central Africa, where bloody wars have happened. Not only, minerals in general and bloody diamonds and all these things. So the point is to insist on these standards and adopt an international cooperation and cross-border coordination to enforce legal standards. When we have criminal actors that move between countries and they take the gold from one country to the other and change the origins, throughout bribery or simply just accept it on a lower price from commercial intermediators. Good. And the state again, work out government failures, mainly for to call on the provision of security and public order. The peace agreement has helped, of course. I mentioned these territorial development programs and more presence of military forces or policy forces. Of course, this is important. However, we're now experiencing all the post-conflict consequences. Non-state actors, non-state armed actors don't disappear. Suddenly they stayed in territories and they have a know-how of violence and exploit resources. So this is the situation right now. And excessive red tape and too many state agencies call out for public sector innovation. And this point also applies for wind farms. Companies complain about procedures to get a license, to an environmental license, could mean 500 days, which is more than 1 year. And this is crazy if you really want to enforce better standards and stop people from operating without proper enforcement. The recent regulation that was adopted in 2022 gives us hope. It recognizes diversity of conditions and actors. We required specific regulatory responses because general regulations are open doors for predatory practices. The point is, how do we develop this specific regulation? So we are now in 2025, yes, and we haven't developed this general legal framework. To develop it, we need information. Real-time information. And there are some technologies that now help to know who and in which conditions are exploiting gold. So that's one point to keep insisting. And a more inclusive regulation, it's an achievement of these miners, and of course also the help of international actors. Let's see, it's sleeping. Okay. So now, finally, to wrap up, since it stops there. Yeah. Yeah, it's working, thank you. Yeah. Right, I'm not sure if you saw that. Yes, I think so. Because it stopped. Okay. So let's go back to the opening point on what has changed. Where do we stand in terms of this unchecked capitalism? And when we discussed these topics, I want to see the glass half full. However, we know there's a glass half empty, right? But with an optimistic perspective, I would say we have new elements in our society to move away from wild capitalism and reach a socially and ecologically responsible version of it. And if we think about 100 years ago, in the last century, important changes have taken place. We have decolonization processes, and that gives the self-determined, self-ruled rights to people. And we have this notion of development. 100 years ago in economics, we didn't have this notion. We have the classical economics, and in the 1920s, John Maynard Keynes was criticizing the idea of our auto-regulated market because of the Great Depression. So we We have now different tools, this concept of development. And we have a cultural revolution that changed our idea of progress, our idea of that only few actors have rights and the others don't. And as a result of that, in Colombia, we adopted a different constitutional framework. It has 30 years or so. It's quite recent. In this framework, we granted rights to people that didn't exist before. Indigenous communities, Afro-descendant communities, the environment was included, recognizing we were a highly biodiverse country. So this framework, maybe as I wrote here, it's aspirational. We still don't really enjoy the full, all the application of these rights and aspiration, but it's a framework that give us a goal to aim. The second new element is the communication technologies that help us reduce informational asymmetries, produce data and policy, assess and discuss extractivist practices. 100 years ago, we started having, well, it was more popular, the use of the photography, radio, printed press, and all that helped people to talk to others what happened in Africa, what happened in Asia, and denounce and really give us information of ugly practices that were taking place. So right now, communication technology keeps advancing and give us much more opportunity to understand and communicate and make it public, openly public. And I would say our new element, the advancement of social sciences in the world and Latin America, offers powerful lenses to guide us through social change. 100 years ago, we have a narrow notion of progress, an Eurocentric version of the world, a male-centric approach, anthropocentric approach, view, right? All these changed. Social sciences progressed so much. Of course, we want to see even further progress. And in my case, and I'm aligned with Ostrom's approach of integrating social science to have more powerful lenses to understand complex problems, because development is complex, and sustainable development, it's the double, it's even more complex, right? So we have all these, all the elements fill in our glass to build this checked version of capitalism. With this, I'm finishing. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ángela. Well, I don't know if any online or here have any questions or comments, observations, or something. Yeah.
Well, first, thank you for the presentation. It's very relevant revision of various problems that we have in Colombia. I'm the Colombiano. I think that it's a clear explanation in the division of agents in the different conflicts, the community, for example, in Antioquia and Chocó, the criminal sector and the government sector. But I think that it's necessary open or generate the different relation or identify a different situation in the government, because exists or power capture or a cooperation in the government sector with the guerrilla or the paramilitary agents, and it have a difficult situation in different regions, because the military are part of the militaries, part of the policy, and the regional politicians that cooperate with the illegal structures, and it's very difficult to eliminate. So all these keys that are very important, it's needed to add or clarify the transformation that we need to build into the institutional structures, the government structures, to resolve that problems. I put a little example. In the Congress, different congressman and congresswoman have to try modify the meaning law to incorporate the difference with the meaning in low scale, and difference with the illegal activities, and exist a lot of political forces to oppose to generate that new law, because have a large interest or with the criminal sectors or the multinationals sectors. So that is a little example, but I think that it's a complement in the analysis of the government sector that can generate a large picture of the problem. So thank you.
Right. So let me see if I understand what you're saying. It's before the debate about this new regulation that includes these small scale miners. There was opposition of large companies to adopt, to modify the regulation, of course. However, we need to keep in mind that the mining code has not been modified. That's the struggle to change the mining code. What we had is a new law for formalization. Right, it's about formalization, and now these large companies understood that they could they could hire or make association contracts with small scale miners. So there's a more cooperative approach than, no, I don't want you to see any traditional artisanal or small scale miners. Now they accept to share the area to be exploited. But yeah, of course, that this is always, there's always institution building goes through conflicts between groups. That's part of the story. We know institutions have a distributional impact. Who gets what? So yes, I do agree. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. This is a really cool talk, and I really enjoyed it. So I kind of sit in the post-growth research, and I love the questions that they ask, and I love what they're trying to answer. But one of my skepticisms of the post-growth movement is the prisoner's dilemma, and I don't think we have an answer in the post-growth research community yet of how we deal with the prisoner's dilemma. And I guess I'm interested in how you would apply that. This is probably a longer conversation over the week, but how would you apply the IAD framework and the assurance game and prisoner's dilemma to kind of this post-growth research area?
Right, you mean formally in terms of modeling the interaction?
Yeah, I would say conceptually and formally in the modeling. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, both. Anywhere that your mind goes, I guess I would say with that.
Yes, yeah, how to develop it formally. This is what you'll tell me if I understood the point. Well, one thing with this institutional analysis and development framework is to use game theory insights to understand social interactions. However, build up models requires to simplify, right? And that goes against rich, detailed context, and also all these sequence of interactions are more challenging to model and to capture. It could be possible. Well, now we'll have 1 week to study agent-based models and figure it out, right? But in Ostrom's framework, she says we're going to sacrifice some parsimony in the analysis to have a richer analysis, right? And there's always this tension. That's why we need to combine methodologies, right? To really to provide empirically grounded assumptions for the models, right? But it seems to me it's really, I would say, impossible to capture all the interactions. And we have several games going on here, simultaneous games, different ones and simultaneous, which is really intractable, right? But that's a main point. These experimental and methods and models help us to gain, to scale up analysis and to understand social patterns of interactions. With case studies, we have the risk of being too much into the case, right? And say, okay, this is it. This only happens in La Guajira. It only happens in Chocó, right? And that's why the Ostrom's approach, it's so fruitful, so promising. It's challenging. We in social sciences, complexity means, that's the other point of this methodological flexibility. Complexity here means agents learned and change their preferences and internalize or not, or get new information. So the evolutionary approach really help us to really take into account this complex dynamic. So we don't have formal models, sorry for this. However, that could be the aim, that could be the point, to understand this complexity, right? Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to more conversations.
Thank you for the presentation. It was really insightful. My question is that in the second case, the miners, it seems to me that the miners are produced in market relations. And the goods the service that they need for their own are going to be bought using the money that they earn in the market relations of mining. But in the first case, I didn't understand if the relations of the indigenous communities are regulated by market relations, or if they provide their own goods by their own, because it seems to me that if you exchange that for a compensation, then you're going to have to make a big change in the way that they live, and you're going to have to build any infrastructure or change the integrate them into market relations. So I was wondering about this.
Right. Yeah. So you're wondering about this in the wind farms case, the relationships of indigenous communities with markets. Yes. Well, that's a big point, because these people have been isolated, are poor, have low educational standards. They live in their own bubble, right? Tourism, maybe it's the way they communicate with the external world, the Colombian territory. And recently, in the last decade, they learned to have hostels and restaurants, and to offer tourism packages for people to come to the region. The region is beautiful, really. It's amazing to be there, really, the landscape and the beauty of nature. So many foreigner travelers go to the area, and they've been learning. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it was impossible to make tourism in the area. And that reflected this reluctance of communities to have contact with foreigners. They didn't have this profit mentality that we have. It's business, let's make money. No, they didn't. So recently we see people from Europe, from the US, doing all this windsurfing and all these sports in the area. And we have more restaurants and hostels, right? So, but the community designated some people to manage those business. So tourists right now, if you go to the region, you don't see communities. They don't want this contact, right? And as you suggested, of course, the entry of these energy companies means their territory will be full of foreigners, and that roads will be, they will have more roads. When I went to the area recently, some people said to me, the government had the budget, the money for a road, but they didn't want the road. They rejected it. Now, why? Why so? Because they don't want people to come in the area, and they want to control their territory, really. And when you have roads, what else? Energy. But there are other good consequences. 10 years ago or 20 years ago, they didn't have these salty water processing plants. Now they have more freshwater plants. And that's good, that improves health standards. So there's always this dilemma, of course, for this community. And that's the point. And I'm sure this is happening in other places of the global south, not only Latin America, but in other places that were not touched or infiltrated by this capitalist mindset.
Thanks.
Well, thank you for the presentation. I want to expand, I guess, on Paulo's question, and have further questions on the Guajira wind farm. Yeah, I'm curious what has happened with the current Petros administration when it comes to the reduction of royalties to the community. You said that royalties were reduced from 6% to 1%. And the question, if they are self-sufficient, if they can survive without being part of a monetary economy, it's important to see if they do need to keep opening up to foreigners or tourist industry to survive. And I am curious if they have any sort of representation on their own land and they can take decisions on who to come, who not to come, maybe in the government, and how these could be important to be more sovereign.
Could you, sorry, so your main first point is about royalties?
Yes.
The second one, could you raise your voice? Well,
Sure,
thank you.
sorry. Is this better?
The second point was
If
about?
they have any sort of representation in the government, or if they have autonomy on the land to decide what's done, what happens in the land. Yeah.
But the indigenous reserve, you mean the collective land,
the wind
right?
farm in La Guajira.
Yes. Okay. Good. Thanks. About royalties, the recent government changed, reversed the Duque's government, which was the previous president, and they restored the previous clause that says 6% of raw energy production will go to Wayuu communities. However, within the government, the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Mines were fighting because of this. The Ministry of Finance said it's too much. It's affecting negatively the company's profit. It's too much. We need to reduce it. And the Ministry of Mining said, no, this is communities' right. So right now they're in conflicting views. We don't know exactly what will happen. And this is part of the uncertainty of projects that affects companies' profit. And I guess all these claims against the current government from companies is related to this point. They are afraid that the current government sticks to the 6% of transfers, right? And it's important to say these transfers don't go directly to communities. They go through productive projects. So the point is to create a fund, and communities, companies deposit these transfers into a fund, and somehow, I'm not sure exactly who, or maybe a state agency or regional authorities, along with community authorities, decide which projects will be funded with this money, right? The other, I'm sorry, I forget the second point.
Well, I guess there were two more questions. One is if they have any sort of representation in the government or in the parliament, or if they can take decisions on their own land.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And then if
the
they're
reserve area. Mm-hmm.
And then if they're self-sufficient, if they can live without opening up to a monetary economy.
Right. Well, there are conflicting legislations here. The indigenous reserve is granted, and prior consultation as well. Right. This is part of their rights. In rights, people cannot take this away from them. However, there's all these development programs, a plan, national development plan, that says when there's a project of national economic interest, right? So you invoke the national interest over communities' needs or rights, and it always happens when it comes to resource exploitation. The national government says we have a national interest, which is debatable, right? It's an interest, or it's going to generate employment and revenue, and for who? For whom, right? For who? This community, well, the Wayuu community has used this international actor support to make it publish, to say, please, we need you to tell the world this is taking place. Recently, the BBC made a note on the wind farms in La Guajira. And that's part of the struggle, to say, hey, international community, hey, indigenous communities of other countries, look what's going on here. They want to somehow modify in the practice our right to manage the territory, invoking national interest. Yeah, right. So, yes, it's a point to keep in mind, these conflicting views.
Thank you very much for your talk. It was truly insightful and enriching. I really learned a lot. And I would be interesting to know what is, according to you, the best...
Can you please raise your voice?
Yeah, sorry. I would like to know what's, according to you, the best scientific tool to experiment with a lot of policies and measures that have not been experimented yet. I guess that most economists would tell you, let's run a random control trial, and so-called RCT, which I guess might be extremely difficult to do in this context and perhaps ethically problematic sometimes. On the other hand, you also mentioned ABMs, which could be a tool because you can create synthetic economies and you can experiment with stuff, do counterfactuals and so on and so on. But I have to say I have trouble imagining how can you fit so much complexity in a model. And what you showed us is really rich, and I think it's difficult to get away with it to a lot of that complexity. You cannot simplify much, perhaps. So I guess my question to you is, what's the best tool and how we strike a balance between producing knowledge which is generable enough, but still meaningful, so not too simplistic?
Okay, let's see. First, the point about experiments. You were thinking about experiments to understand power struggles? Yeah, or many other interactions?
Perhaps about what are the best policies to, for example, convince some communities that some project is valuable for them also, and so on and so forth.
Oh, I see. Well, no, I haven't seen these kind of applications, because in the public policy domain, history and the path of interaction has a heavy weight. How things started and the memory of the process, right? So introduce this in an experimental setting. I haven't seen it, right? But it could be a possibility. I don't know. Well, I've seen some experiments more in the line of building trust, for example, or designing mechanisms for people to provide a collective good. In the case of the small-scale miners, some people made experiments to understand how these actors help each other to enforce the standards, to self-enforced standards, like the technical standards or the commitment to eliminate mercury, and how to design the experiments were to design, the experiment investigated how miners keep up the commitment and monitor each other. And they said, well, indeed, this in fact is published in an international journal. And they said these communities are able to self-enforce better technological exploitation standards, but sanctions cannot be too high. So, for example, this is a result, right? And sanctions should be progressive and build up, right? This is interesting, especially in communities that don't have this state reach, and we don't have monitoring authorities in each corner or in each exploitation site, right? So the miners are the main actors to internalize the better standards, right? This is what I've seen. in terms of experimental methods. But yes, for the public policies, interactions, no. But maybe there's some literature, I don't know it, right? And the point about complexity, I don't know if you could rephrase it shortly, in a short question to be more clear, because I didn't get it.
No, I was thinking more about, because you mentioned ABMs, and I think they could be potentially a good tool to study how different policy, the effect of different policies in this context. On the other hand, it seems to me that there is so much complexity that plays a role here that might be difficult to fit into a model. So I wonder if, I guess it's a good tool. I don't know if, practically speaking, it's possible. I would like to know your insights about this.
Oh, yeah, right. Well, in terms of, I can talk about the framework I'm using, right? The institutional analysis and development framework. There may be other tools for that, more quantitative, right? But I think it helps if we have in mind theoretical questions, right? If we use two common concepts and a common language to build up to have the essence of the interaction, the phenomena we're studying. Because if we go into too many details because we want to understand a complex phenomena for the sake of complexity, then you get lost, right? As I told you, there may be other tools. I don't know them. I know people used these like sort of general equilibrium models and to grasp all these interactions and parameters, and that reflects the institutional context or the context. I know people do so. The point is how the ground for these assumptions and if they are really meaningful for what you want to explain. But looking at Ostrom's work, I would say this systematic analysis of collective action on common pool resources was really powerful. It changed our paradigm of the tragedy of the commons. When everybody said, no, people don't cooperate, the Nash equilibrium is the rule. We are always inevitably in the tragedy of the commons. People overused resources, and that's it. And she said, no, let's wait. I saw cases where people make agreements. Let's go to the field work. Let's go our offices, but not. I'm sorry, I don't know if you, some of you may come from other disciplines, but sometimes I've seen this when you do field-based work, and you get in love with so many cultural details and the environmental details as well, and that's good, right? But what you want to know about the interaction and the very idea of interaction, to have it in mind. There's an interaction. Not all social scientists have this approach, this view, right? And Ostrom said, let's go out and see how people manage common pool resources problems. And she found that in many places of the world, there were no over-extraction. So let's change our assumptions, the theoretical assumptions. And I would say, yes, this qualitative approach, yes, is useful, right? But as I said again, we need analytic lenses, we need categories, we need common language, right? And communicate and collaborate with researchers doing this work of making more general analysis, making more deductive reasonings, right? To get the essence of social interactions and social inertia or social change, right? This is the way we so far, right? On this institutional analysis and development framework we have to tackle complexity. But yeah, thanks for your question.
Well, thank you very much, Angela. I'm really proud of this first session because it is a very good beginning to start discuss something more technical in the the following days. But it is a very important issue for, I think, all of us who are from, no, we're not from America, but we know, we have in mind America and Latin America and the regions and indigenous, you know. So thank you very much, Angela. We have no more time for more questions. If you want to talk with Angela, you have here your breakfast, so you can discuss. And well, thank you very much. And we have this very long, for those who are online, please do not go because we are gonna see your names. And for the first session, the introductory session, well, I think I do not introduce at first or two professors, yeah, because, no, I'm sorry. Here is Luca Eduardo Fierro and Giuliano Toshiro Yahima, if you didn't know who are they are. But, well, that's it. Let's take some breakfast, and then we are going to be here at the same auditorium at 2 p.m. So we have enough time to go if you want the cultural area of the University City, or do whatever you want to do. So, so thank you very much.